Hello, happy Sunday. God bless you, and I hope that you had some good rest today, or that you found something that you could be grateful for. And yeah, just remember that you are blessed to be a blessing, and if you don't know that, now you do. And so it's time to receive that gift and use it. Okay, so I'm going to be carrying on with the Hidden Life of Trees. That's a book we've been reading, and it's written by Peter Wohlleben, and we are at chapter 19, and it is entitled Yours or Mine. So let's go for it. The forest ecosystem is held in a delicate balance. Every being has its niche and its function, which contribute to the well-being of all. Nature is often described like that, or something along those lines. However, that is unfortunately false. For out there under the trees, the law of the jungle rules. Every species wants to survive, and each takes from the others what it needs. All are basically ruthless, and the only reason everything doesn't collapse is because there are safeguards against those who demand more than they do. And one final limitation is an organism's own genetics. An organism that is too greedy and takes too much without giving anything in return destroys what it needs for life and dies out. Most species, therefore, have developed innate behaviors that protect the forest from overexploitation. We are already familiar with this, with a good example, and that is the jay that eats acorns and beech nuts but buries a multitude of them as it does so, ensuring that the trees can multiply more efficiently with it and without it. Whenever you walk through a tall, dark forest, you are walking down the aisles of a huge grocery store. Wow! Oh, that's lovely. Sure. Okay. It is filled with all sorts of delicacies, at least as far as animals, fungi, and bacteria are concerned. A single tree contains millions of calories in the form of sugar, cellulose, lignin, and other carbohydrates. It also contains water and valuable minerals. Did I say grocery store? A better description would be a heavily guarded warehouse, for there is no question here of helping yourself. The door is barred and bark thick, and you must come up with a plan to get to the sweet treasures inside. And you are a woodpecker. Thanks to a unique structure that allows its beak to flex and head muscles to absorb impact, a woodpecker can hack away at trees without getting a headache. Lucky woodpeckers. In the spring, when water is shooting up through the trees, streaming up to the buds, and delivering delicious provisions, several species of woodpeckers, called sapsuckers, drill dotted lines of small holes in the thinner trunks or branches. The trees begin to bleed out of these wounds. Tree blood doesn't look very dramatic. It looks like water. However, the loss of this bodily fluid is as detrimental to the trees as it is to us. This fluid is what these sap-sucking woodpeckers are after, and they begin to lick it up. The trees mostly tolerate the damage as long as the woodpeckers don't get carried away and make too many of these holes. Eventually the holes heal over, leaving patterns that look like intentionally decorative scarring. Aphids, sometimes also called plant lice or green flies, are much lazier than woodpeckers. Instead of flying about industriously and hacking out holes here and there, they attach their sucking mouthparts to the veins of leaves and needles. Thus positioned, they get royally drunk in a way no other animals can. The tree's lifeblood rushes right through these tiny insects and comes out to the other end in large droplets. Aphids need to saturate themselves like this because the sap contains very little protein, a nutrient they need for growth and reproduction. They filter the fluid for the protein they crave and expel most of the carbohydrates, above all, sugar, untouched. Little wonder it rains sticky honeydew under trees infested with aphids. Perhaps you've had the experience of parking your car under a stricken maple only to come back to a thoroughly filthy windscreen. That's why. Okay. There are specialized sap-sucking pests for every tree. Firs, balsam twig aphid. Spruce, green spruce aphid. Oaks, oak leaf phylloxera. And beeches, woolly beech aphid. Okay. There's sucking and excreting going on everywhere, and because the ecological niche of the leaves is already occupied, there are more species painstakingly boring their way through thick bark to reach the places where sap is flowing underneath. Pests that attack bark, such as woolly beech scale, can completely envelope trunks with their waxy, silvery white wool. These irritants have a similar effect on a tree as scabies has on us. Festering wounds appear that take a long time to heal and leave behind rough and scabby bark. Sometimes fungi and bacteria get in and weaken the tree as well, so much so that it dies. Okay. It's no surprise that trees try to defend themselves against these scourges by producing defensive compounds. If the infestations continue, it helps if trees form a thick layer of outer bark to finally get rid of the sap-sucking pests. Yeah, if they do that, they are protected against further attacks for at least a few years. The possibility of infection is not the only problem. With their voracious appetites, sap-sucking pests remove a gigantic quantity of nutrients from trees. Per square yard of forest, the tiny pests can tap many hundreds of tons of pure sugar from the trees. Sugar the trees can no longer use to grow or set aside in reserve for the upcoming year. For many animals, however, sap-sucking pests such as aphids are a blessing. First, they benefit other insects such as ladybugs, whose larvae happily devour one aphid after the other. Then there are forest ants, which love the honeydew the aphids excrete so much that they slurp it up right from the aphids' backsides. Hectic. Okay. To speed up the process, the ants stroke the aphids with their antennae, stimulating them to excrete the honeydew. And to prevent other opportunists from the entertaining idea of eating the ants' valuable aphid colonies, the ants protect them. Okay. There's a regular little livestock operation going on up there in the forest canopy. And whatever the ants can't use doesn't go to waste. Fungi and bacteria quickly colonize the sticky coating that covers the vegetation around the infested tree, and it soon gets covered with black mold. Honeybees also take advantage of aphid excretions. They suck up the sweet droplets, carry them back to their hives, regurgitate them, and turn them into dark forest honey. It is particularly prized by consumers, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with flowers. Gall, midges, and wasps are a bit more subtle. Instead of piercing leaves, they reprogram them. To do this, the adults lay their eggs in a beech or oak leaf. The sap-sucking larvae begin to feed, and thanks to the chemical compounds in their saliva, the leaf begins to grow into a protective casting or gall. Leaf galls can be pointed, beech, or spherical, oak, but in both cases the young insects inside are protected from predators and can nibble away in peace. When fall comes, the leaf galls fall to the ground together with their occupants, which pupate and then hatch in spring. Particularly in beech trees, there can be massive infestations, but they do very little damage to the tree. Caterpillars are a different story. What they set their sights on is not sugary sap, but leaves and needles in their entirety. If there aren't too many of them, the tree barely notices, but populations explode in regular cycles. I had a run-in with one of these population explosions a few years ago in a stand of oaks in the forest I manage. The trees cover a steep south-facing mountain slope. That June, I noticed with horror that the fresh new leaves had completely disappeared, and the trees standing in front of me were as bare as if it were winter. When I got out of my Jeep, lekker, Jeep, I like that, I heard a loud roaring, like a pounding of rain in a storm, but there was a clear blue sky above me, so the noise couldn't be because of the weather. No, it was a hail of feces from millions of oak leaf roller caterpillars. Thousands of black pellets were bouncing off my head and shoulders. Ugh! You can see something similar every year in the large pine forests of eastern and northern Germany. Commercial forest monocultures also encourage the mass production of butterflies and moths, such as nun moths and pine loopers. Isn't that interesting? Another, wow, I can almost hear that and almost, in my imagination, almost embody it, and it's like, that's very different. Okay. What usually happens is that viral illnesses crop up towards the end of the cycle and populations crash. I'm just reading from a book. The caterpillar pellets end in June when the trees are completely stripped of their leaves, and now the trees have to muster their last reserves to leaf out again. Usually that works just fine. After a few weeks have passed, almost no signs of the feeding frenzy remain. However, tree growth is limited, which you can see in the particularly narrow growth ring in the trunk for that year. If trees are infested and defoliated for 2 or 3 years in a row, many of them will weaken and die. Conifer sawflies join the butterfly larvae in the pines. Sawflies saw open plant tissue so that they can lay their eggs there. It's not the appetites of the adults, but the larvae that the trees have to worry about. Up to 12 needles a day disappear into each tiny mouth, which quickly gets dangerous for the tree. Gosh, I can imagine. Yo, just imagine that. And imagine that as in, the tree is, the tree is aware of it. Because, I mean, I don't feel like I need to explain, but the tree is definitely, I would think that the tree would be aware of that going on. Because of how, how it will eventually kind of respond. Anyway, I'll just continue reading from this book. I've already explained in chapter 2 the language of trees. How trees use scent to summon parasitic wasps and other predators to rid themselves of pests. However, there is yet another strategy they can employ, as demonstrated by the bird cherry. Their leaves contain nectar glands, which secrete the same sweet juice as the flowers. In this case, the nectar is for the ants, which spend most of the summer in the trees. And just like people, from time to time, these insects crave something heartier than a sugary snack. They get this in the form of caterpillars, and thus they rid the bird cherry of its uninvited guests. But it doesn't always turn out the way the tree intended. The caterpillars get eaten, but apparently sometimes the amount of sweet nectar the tree provides doesn't satisfy the ants, and they begin to farm aphids. As I've explained, these creatures tap into the leaves, and when the ants stroke the aphids with their antennae, they exude droplets of sugary liquid for them. The feared bark beetle basically goes for broke, seeking out weakened trees and trying to move in. Bark beetles live by the principle all or nothing. Either a single beetle mounts a successful attack and then sends out a scented invitation for hundreds of its kin to come over and they kill the tree, or the tree kills the first beetle and bores into it and the buffet is cancelled for everyone. The coveted prize is the cambium, the actively growing layer between the bark and the wood. This is where the trunk grows. Wood cells form on the inside and bark cells form on the outside. The cambium is succulent and stuffed full of sugar and minerals. In case of emergency, people can also eat it. You can try this out for yourself in the spring. Please go look up how to do that before you go and just try it yourself. I'm pretty sure there are specific ways to do that. If you come across a spruce recently downed by the wind, he's going to explain. Sorry about that, okay? Sorry. If you come across a spruce recently downed by the wind, cut off the bark with a pocket knife. Then run the blade flat along the exposed trunk and peel off long strips about 1/3 of an inch wide. Cambium tastes like slightly resinous carrots, and it's very nutritious. Bark beetles also find it nutritious. That's why they drill tunnels into the bark so that they can lay their eggs close to this energy source. Well protected from enemies, the larvae can eat here until they are nice and fat. This is quite a long chapter. Okay. Healthy spruce defend themselves with terpenes and phenols, some of these names, which can kill the beetles. If that doesn't work, they dribble out sticky resin to trap them. But researchers in Sweden have discovered that the beetles have been arming themselves. Yet again, the weapons are fungi. These fungi are found on the beetles' bodies. As the beetles make their tunnels, the fungi come along for the ride and end up under the bark. Here, they disarm the spruce's chemical defenses by breaking them down into harmless substances. Because the fungi grow faster than the beetles drill, once they make it under the bark, they are always one step ahead. This means all the terrain the bark beetles encounter has been decontaminated and they can feed safely. Now, there is nothing to stop a population explosion, and the thousands of larvae that hatch eventually weaken even healthy trees. Not many spruce can survive such massive attacks. Large herbivores show less finesse. They need to eat many pounds of food daily, but deep in the forest, food is hard to find. Because there's hardly any light, there isn't much greenery on the forest floor, and the juicy leaves high up in the crown are so out of reach. So the natural course of things, there aren't many deer in this ecosystem. They get their chance when the old tree falls over. After the fall, light reaches the forest floor for a few years, and not only young trees grow, but also for a short period of time at least, wildflowers and grasses. Animals rush to the oasis of green, which means that any new growth is heavily browsed. Light means sugar, which makes the young trees attractive to the browsers. In the dim light beneath the mother trees, their tiny, meager buds usually get hardly any food. What little food they need to survive as they wait for their turn to grow, they get from their parents, who pump it into them via their roots. The sugar-deprived buds are tough and bitter, so the deer pass them by. But as soon as the sun reaches the delicate little trees, they start budding out like mad. Photosynthesis gets underway, the leaves get thicker and juicier, and the buds, which form over the summer to break out in the next spring, are all over the youngsters and full of nutrients. And that's the way it should be, because the next generation of trees wants to step on it and grow upward as quickly as it can before the window of light closes again. But all this activity attracts the deer's attention, and they don't want to miss out on the delicacies on offer. And now the competition between the young trees and the deer heats up for a few years. Will the little beeches, oaks, and firs manage to grow tall enough, fast enough, so that the animals can no longer get their mouths around the all-important main shoots? Usually the deer don't destroy all the little trees in one small group, so there are always a couple that escape damage and battle on upward. Those whose leading shoots have been nibbled off now grow bowed and bent, and they are soon overtaken by undamaged shoots. Eventually, damaged youngsters will die from light deprivation and return to hummus. Yeah, light deprivation. Okay. That's not good. That's not a good thing. Not for anybody, especially humans. You gotta get outside. Also, they shouldn't. Shouldn't. Oh man. Children, for example. They shouldn't be stuck in the indoors with no window, and they need light as well. They get light deprived, and obviously we're talking about sunlight. I'm not talking about a phone light. That's not the same thing. And there's a big difference in that, and it is vital. It is so vital. Anyway, I love kids, and my heart just goes out immediately. Anyway, I love people too. I genuinely care about people because, I just want, I want the best for everybody. Even my so-called worst enemy, I want the best for them. Anyway, okay, so one rascal. Did I read this part? Okay, no. One rascal that does more damage than it looks as though it should from its size is the honey fungus mushroom. That innocuous-looking fruiting body that often appears on tree stumps in the fall. They are found in both Europe and Northern America. None of the 7 honey fungus mushrooms native to Central Europe, it's difficult to tell them apart, to do trees any good. Quite the opposite, in fact. Their mycelium, white underground threads, force their way into the root of firs, beeches, oaks, and other species of tree. Eventually, they grow up under the bark where they form white fan-shaped patterns. The bounty They steal at first mostly sugar and nutrients from out of the cambium. It is carted off in what... I don't like how this sentence is constructed. I'm sorry. Okay. The bounty they steal, at first mostly sugar and nutrients out of the cambium, is carted off in what looks like thick black cords. These root-like structures, which are sometimes referred to as bootlaces because of their appearance, are unique in the world of fungi. But honey fungus doesn't content itself with sugary treats. As it continues to develop, it eats through wood as well as causes its host tree to rot. At the end of the process, the tree eventually dies. Pine snap, which belongs to the same family as blueberries and heathers, is much more subtle. It doesn't contain any green pigment and manages to grow only a nondescript light brown flower. A plant that isn't green doesn't contain any chlorophyll and therefore cannot photosynthesize. This means the pine snap depends on others for food. It insinuates itself with mycorrhizal fungi, the ones helping the tree's roots, and because it doesn't photosynthesize and therefore doesn't need any light, it can grow even in the darkest stands of spruce. Therefore, it taps into the flow of nutrients traveling between the fungi and the tree roots, siphoning off a portion for itself. Small cow wheat does something similar, only rather more sanctimoniously. It also loves spruce and also hooks up to the root fungi system, joining the feast as an uninvited guest. Although its above ground parts are typical plant green and can indeed turn a bit of light and carbon dioxide into sugar, they are mostly a display to disguise what's really going on. Trees offer considerably more than just food. Animals abuse young trees by using them as convenient rubbing posts. For instance, every year, male deer have to get rid of the skin or velvet from their soon-to-be shed antlers. So they search out a little tree that is sturdy enough not to break easily and at the same time also slightly flexible. Here the lords of creation let loose for days on end until the last scrap of itchy skin has been rubbed off. The little tree's bark is in such a bad state after this performance that the little tree usually dies. When they are choosing their trees, deer go for whatever is unusual. Whether they choose spruce, beech, pine, or oak, they will always choose whatever is uncommon locally. Who knows? Perhaps the smell of the shredded bark acts like an exotic perfume. It's the same with people. It's the rare things that are most highly prized. What's the diameter? What accent is that? Once the diameter of the trunk exceeds 4 inches, its game is over. By then, the bark of most species of trees is so thick that it can withstand the impetuous antlered beasts. In addition, the trunks are now so stable that they no longer bend, and they are too wide to fit between the tips of the deer's antlers. But now the deer needs something else. Normally, they wouldn't be living in the forest at all because they eat mostly grass. Grass is a rarity in a natural forest and almost never present in the quantities a whole herd requires. And therefore, these majestic animals prefer to live out in the open. But river valleys where floods ensure open grassland are where people like to live. Every square yard is used for urban areas or agriculture, and so the deer have retreated to the forest even though they sneak out at night. But as typical plant eaters, they need fiber-rich foods around the clock. When there isn't anything else, in desperation, they turn to tree bark. Yeah. Yeah. That, like, just, we have so much to be grateful for, seriously. And there's so much that we take for granted. And when I say we, I'm saying just we, as in not the whole entire world and everybody and thing in it, but we as in a large amount of people. That's what I'm talking about. So that anyone who can fit into that has got space in them. And yeah, it's a lesson to learn. So it's something good to know, and it's something good to work on in your life. Anyway, when a tree is full of water in the summer, it's easy to peel off its bark. The deer bite into it with their incisors, which they have only on their lower jaws, and pull off whole strips from the bottom up. In winter, when the trees are sleeping and the bark is dry, all the deer can do is tear off chunks. As always, this activity is not only really painful for trees, but also life-threatening. There's often a large-scale fungal invasion through the huge gaping wounds, which quickly breaks down the wood. The damage is so extensive, the tree can't close the wound by quickly wailing it off. If the tree grew up in an undisturbed forest, that is to say nice and slowly, it can survive even severe setbacks like this. Its wood is made up of the tiniest rings, so it's tough and dense, which makes things very difficult for the fungi that are trying to work their way into it. I've often seen tree youngsters like this and have managed to close wounds, even though it took them decades. It's quite another story. Sorry. It's quite another story with the planted trees in our commercial forests. Usually they grow very quickly, and their growth rings are huge. Therefore, their wood contains a great deal of air. Air and moisture? These are ideal conditions for fungi. And so the inevitable happens. Severely damaged trees snap in middle age. If, however, the wounds inflicted over the winter are numerous but small, the tree can close them up without suffering any long-term damage. Why does he end the chapters like that? But I mean, let's just read that part again. And so the inevitable happens. Severely damaged trees snap in middle age. If, however, the wounds inflicted over the winter are numerous but small, the tree can close them up without suffering any long-term damage. Now, what, like, for yourself, what do you hear in that? And what is your what's the call? What is your instinctive voice trying to say to you when you sort of have that sort of computated in your brain or whatever? Is there a question that arises in you? Is there sort of like something that sort of stops you and think, but no, what about? And then are you recognizing perhaps how that what I just read is sort of like a mirror to a lot of things, but like and in many ways and aspects actually. But let's just say to life. And it's sad. It's really, really sad. Because, this is often, let's say, I'll propose something. What about after sort of understanding that last bit, you maybe ask yourself, And then what? And then what? And then what? How is it going to continue? If you hear this, how do you think it should continue? How do you think it would continue? How do you think it could continue? What do you think can be done for bettering the quality of life and to lower damage and to seriously, like, you know, either remedy suffering or help make the suffering become less, or have certain things in place so that suffering doesn't arise. And I mean, here's a couple of words: damage, wounds, suffering, long-term damage. I mean, it's pretty hectic. And for me, you know, I think, you know, it definitely goes deeper. So I won't continue to talk, because I think that this is definitely, the last paragraph is definitely not only for me, for you, for anyone else. It speaks to something deep. And I think that, you know, at least for me, I can recognize a couple of things, because I suppose I've already understood certain parts of my life, or certain things that I've been through, to be able to know what this means inside of me personally. And so, you know, in a way, I could sort of carry on and on and on and like think, you know, I should share, but at the same time, I'm okay with, you know, I'm content with just, you know, having the personal understanding of this. But there's a but after. That's what I will tell you. There's a but after that. And if you don't know, or you like what comes after the but, then I will give you the best recommendation I can. But God. And don't become allergic, please. But God. But God. Those just, yo. When there's a sentence or a thing and it like sort of ends like, and it's like, you know, there can be that potential for freaking out or chaos, or like, you know, total disappointment, or be like a smackdown or whatever. And it's like, oh, how come is this, you know, blah blah blah. No, we'll just hold your feet onto the ground and just, you know, just breathe and say, but God. And then I'm not going to tell you, but go from there. There's a continuum that might be revealed to you, or that you can experience, or that you know, sort of resembles itself and presents itself to you as a way of seeing into the future in a way that you can get vision and answers and maybe confirmation for the things that you can do now. But anyway, I know I'm not a perfect person, and sure, on that, it took me many years to completely break that misunderstanding that I had of myself. Gosh, man. It's not that I thought I was perfect, but I went through this hectic chase. It broke me in several places. But I'm glad that the perfection illusion, perfection perception that I had broke as well. It got shattered. And then I was like, oh, wow. And I thank God I'm not perfect. It's hectic. And that sounds vague, I know. But, it's like there's the little bubble, and then it's like doot, 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 and graphs, and there's much more to say on that. But yeah, like, hectic. But I suppose what I can say from there is that I think there's freedom in that, and there's this sort of like, pressure that's off, because you realize that you don't have to be perfect, because you can never be perfect. And that's not a reason for you to like hammer yourself and be hard on yourself for. No. That's almost a blessing, because it means that the parts of you that are not, that perhaps you don't like, or that are flaws or weaknesses, whatever the case may be, the parts of you that you consider needed to be like worked on so much so that you could achieve this so-called perfection, that you feel like you needed to somehow change, eradicate, remove, or whatever from you so that you can achieve this so-called perfection. Those parts of you that you hate, those parts of you that are like, when you look at it, you blow it out of proportion, and make yourself feel like you're some kind of mistake, or that you're some kind of a problem, and therefore you have to adapt and change and mold yourself and torture yourself, destroy yourself, cause destruction, illness, and all to conform to the so-called perfection. And that's a horrific, horrible. That's a trap. That's a trap. It's a trap. I love it. I love it when I can see a flaw in another person. It just makes me love them more. And that may sound like a really strange thing, but okay, it sounds strange. Wow, it sounds strange. Okay. Because, you know why? It's because when I can see that there is something sort of revealed in that, or maybe it's just a reminder, or there's just something that I can see in that, and that sort of makes me maybe open up, or makes me sort of be able to be more compassionate. I don't know, lots of things like that. I'm trying to just be quick and vague and general, but I love it when I can identify another person's flaw, because and I can say, okay, maybe it's a little bit less as intensified when I can find a flaw of my own that I have, and then it's really hard work to learn to accept that and not accelerate that and try and morph it and change it, and eventually just really end up causing it's just causing more hard work to come. which I can say eventually comes back to, okay, you still got those parts of you, and they are to learn to embrace, because they are also what makes you whole, like what makes you a person, a human being, and hopefully a humane one. Yeah, anyway, I feel like I've been talking for way too long, but back of my mind, I know that that's not necessarily true. I don't actually think that I've spoken enough today at all. I haven't spoken much at all. Been very quiet today. That's probably why I've been feeling so uncomfortable. Well, uncomfortable's not the right word. Uncomfortable is the living zone you need to kind of be in right now. But I think very restless might be the feeling. And I'm realizing now why. It's probably because I probably needed to make more of an effort to talk to someone today. So, hectic. But yeah, at least God's there, you know, and He hears and He listens, and yeah, you know, God is so good. Yeah, I love Him. It's so hard to describe. But, you know, one of the best things that I've done, and that just I continue to do because it's just more and more, is pursue a relationship with Him and have a relationship with Him and become intimate in that relationship and get to know Him and spend time in His presence. Because there is just something about that I don't have any words, but there's something about that makes my heart open, and that allows me to feel love. Like love, and it's not love as in my, like, just small love, like, no. I mean, like, cosmic, huge love, that it's just not containable. And, you know, it's like in the presence of that, just completely soaked, completely, it's like, it's not a feeling, it's definitely not a feeling, it's like, you're in it. And you know, like, there's some things that you can think about that God's done. And He's done so many things in our lives. And I do think that it's important for each person to sort of have a little bit of reflection, look back on your life, and spot the places where God was there for you. He heard your prayer, and in fact He answered it. And, you know, and those are things that when you are grateful for them and you praise God for them, joy, peace. And it's also like, you know, when you realize you've done something that's like causing, you know, a little bit of what's the word? Conviction inside of you. Don't let that grow into like you bouncing off the walls like a person on drugs. Although I'm not judging anyone, you know, like, but you know, that's that sign that you need to just go to Him and confess and repent, and He forgives you immediately on the spot. And that's another way. It's just like there's this like, and what you think that you might experience, like hate and condemnation and punishment. No, you get this experience of not humiliation, not at all. You get an opportunity to feel God's grace and mercy, and you get the ability to be humble. And that's such a, it's wow, it's a really unique, it's a unique I don't know whether you should say state of being, or it's a unique atmosphere that you can be in, and yeah, that is quite interesting. And yeah, there's so much that you can experience with God. Like, He's not boring at all. In fact, he's like what Where's something? Don't have a piece of rice lying around here. Okay, here's a kitchen thing, kitchen towel. It's random, I know. I was hoping something smaller, but anyway, that's pretty boring, right? It's useful, and maybe it's not the best example, but any example of that is good enough, because it's an example of something, and you can think either to the extent of your thoughts, or you can think of it from left brain, right brain, or not think of it at all, or maybe you're going to feel some type of way in association to it, I don't know, or maybe you're going to just realize, sort of without thinking, oh, I'm good, this is what I must do with that thing, or just like stand away from it. Anyway, moving on from that, we can make this into we can make that into something to be experienced as amazing grace, or an amazing act of creativity, or an amazing state, or I feel like I'm being a little too abstract right now, is God. What God can take anything, but that you dub as boring, mundane, or whatever, because you have limited thinking, and because of our, God's thoughts is above our thoughts. So, and we do not know everything. We really don't. As you grow older, and you're maturing and growing, hopefully as well, and developing, you begin to realize how much you don't know, and then how much more and more and more and more that you don't know. And that can be freaky, like, in a way, because I remember at some point I was thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm having like this crazy memory loss, I was like, it was very hard for me to understand. I was like, what's going on? And then there was, it came to, I'm skipping an in-between part because I got, and it came to sort of realizing, and also I think there's an act of like submission maybe, or there's an act of like deflation of pride maybe, or like if pride were like a balloon, you take a needle and pop it. That's fun. But anyway, and then I think maybe a couple of ego deaths as well contributed to getting to the place of realizing more and more, and at the same time understanding, oh, okay, what I need to do with this is accept it, embrace it. Then I don't know. I will come to places where I'm like, oh, unknown. I do not know. I am in an unknown place. This is a different place in my life. Never been here before. Now and then I'm like, well, and then I'm also like, well, I don't trust anybody. Who do I go? Who do I go to? I don't want to go to anybody. And I think in myself, and I'm like, wow, I really don't know. I can't really put my trust in me to just sort of navigate out of, or know how to work that space of which I don't know anything. But when that comes up and I realize, oh, here's more to how much I don't know, I can, something like alert arises in me that, only lately has become sort of, that's the little window of opportunity where, let's say, you can either, maybe I shouldn't say it's a window, that's where an opportunity lies, and what you can do with that opportunity is to choose to go to God and trust Him, and put your trust in Him completely, and sometimes that's at a point where you fully you're fully surrendering yourself, because to get that true trust, sometimes, at least for me, it's like I lay I don't know how much longer I'll be around, but I'll get to a place where I'm saying to God, whatever I have left, I give it unto you. I just give it unto you. God, I trust you. I want you, Lord. I want to go your way. I don't want my way. And put my trust in him. And that's where an understanding of that sort of or maybe there's a test day or whatever, or that's where I think that your faith is revealed a little bit to you, because, but in a paradoxical way, because to do that is kind of like this blind, don't want to say following, this blind this blind trust. You're placing your trust, you're laying your life and you're giving it to him. And then what I've been saying lately is like, and what I've been needing to do lately, and realizing how much I need him. And if I get like a little bit too far, like away from him, and that distance is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, I'm like, oh my gosh, and I just need him more, and I need him more and more and more. And there's something really interesting about that. And I don't exactly know what that means. But for me, whatever that means, that is something that is worth pursuing for me, because he's the only one, like, he's the only one like him. And what he's done for me, and the fact that I can be in a relationship with him and experience his love, and experience getting to know myself through him teaching me, and getting to know him, and having that abiding in one another, and working at that relationship, and yeah, you get to a sort of knowing where you're like, well, if I'm with God, everything will be fine. I'll be fine. That's all I need. I'm not afraid of death, but as long as I'm with God. And so that is like the number one thing. He's my priority. That is the relationship that is so important. And it's worth it. I mean, the time is now. You have that opportunity now. And what you'll experience is the most, what can I say? The most unexplainable things. And the most amazing things. And there's a reason why so many people unashamedly just declare how much they love him. And anyway, so I've nearly spoken for an hour. I'm so sorry, but I don't think I'm going to cut this up. And so I think I'm going to post it just like this. And I think I should end off with something. Trying to okay. So I sometimes, when I go walk in the park, sometimes I have prepared like a few rocks that I put messages on. I know, nobody knows it's me. And I'll place the rocks in certain places. So this one says, trust the process. This one says, you are amazing. This one says, let love grow. This one says, just breathe. You'll be okay. You are okay. And I intend to make more. Oh, here's another one. be grateful. And don't give up. And yeah, stay strong. Reach out. Sending love, blessings, and if you need prayer for anything, if you need prayer, please don't hesitate to send me a message, and I would love to pray for you. Bye.